Well, this is starting to be a trend. Down by one score in early third quarter, and then you get a multitude of turnovers, and the game just completely goes out of proportion. Well, before I get any further in this, let me go get rid of the elephant in the room of, yes, I completely forgot to mention on the obvious fact of Aiden Armenta and backup quarterback Hunter Herring being hurt with both undisclosed injuries, that they did not give that much information on what was wrong with them, but they did say they were going to be out for this game. But regardless, going into the second half of this game, Monroe was down 21-14. Alright, you basically get the first four possessions of the game. Teams driving down the field back to back. Monroe touchdown, Southern Miss touchdown. Then Monroe misses a field goal. Southern Miss responds with a touchdown. Then you get Monroe's first punt of the game on a 3-and-out. Southern Miss gets another touchdown. We got 21-7. Oh, this might end up coming into a blowout, especially since another 3-and-out by Louisiana Monroe. So potentially, for the fact having Landon Graves in, this is going to end up being just something they're not able to overcome, and they're just going to end up losing their will on this and be able to get the blowout further on earlier in this matchup. But fortunately, they grab a 3-and-out once again they grab two straight 3-and-outs on Southern Miss, and then finally respond with, alright, you basically get the first four possessions of the game. Teams driving down the field back to back. Monroe touchdown, Southern Miss touchdown. Then Monroe misses a field goal. Southern Miss responds with a touchdown. Then you get Monroe's first punt of the game on a 3-and-out. Southern Miss gets another touchdown. We got 21-7. Oh, this might end up coming into a blowout, especially since another 3-and-out by Louisiana Monroe. So potentially, for the fact having Landon Graves in, this is going to end up being just something they're not able to overcome, and they're just going to end up losing their will on this and be able to get the blowout further on earlier in this matchup. But fortunately, they grab a 3-and-out once again they grab two straight 3-and-outs on Southern Miss, and then finally respond with Zach Palmer-Smith was able to get a 21-yard touchdown run, who would end up being the best player of their offense, having on 11 carries, 111 yards, and a touchdown. So he was able to be very productive on the ground. They got one more stop for Southern Miss, making it to where Monroe could just go into the half down one score, and we have a game here. Nick Trujillo, who was not a factor in the game, even though he led the team in receptions, 4 receptions, 19 yards. Then Monroe responds with a touchdown. Zach Palmer-Smith was able to get a 21-yard touchdown run, who would end up being the best player of their offense for this game, having on 11 carries, 111 yards, and a touchdown. So he was able to be very productive on the ground, and they got one more stop for Southern Miss, making it to where Monroe could just go into the half down one score, and we have a game here. Even the second half starts out fine. They get Southern Miss to punt after a 7-play drive that gets them to nearly midfield. Then on the punt, the up man decides to make a fair catch at the 7-yard line. Unfortunately, he can't make the catch. Southern Miss recovers at the 7. 2 plays later, we have a 28-14 game, and the game is completely flipped. All the momentum that Monroe had going into the half and the beginning of the third quarter, all gone. Both teams end up trading late fourth quarter touchdowns, and then we get our final score of 49-21. Southern Miss gets their blowout win. Louisiana Monroe goes down 3-5, 1-3 in the conference. Once again, Monroe, their postseason plans are still potentially in line, as the last 4 games of the season, all winnable games. We'll have to see what ends up happening with Armena with Hunter Herring. But at this point, they have a chance with each of those games because none of them are overwhelmingly strong opponents, where Old Dominion is the only one above 500. But taking a look at his stat lines, Landon Graves, respectable in the first half, but in the second half had both of his interceptions, finishing on the day 12 for 26, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Zach Palmer-Smith, 11 carries, 111 yards. Weren't able to get that much production with Braylon McReynolds, also 11 carries, but just 37 yards. And no one in the receiving corps gotten more than 4 receptions or 34 yards receiving. In total, what Monroe was able to do, which kept them in the game early on, as I said, they control the time possession. Basically 35 to 25 in time possession edge. They had more first downs. They were better on third down. A lot of the stat lines actually did go to their advantage, but then the total yards, the stretches that Southern Miss was able to get back-to-back touchdown drives, it just ended up overwhelming this defense. At 445 to 312 overall, 248 in the air for Braxton, who was 18 for 23 with 4 touchdowns. Overall, rushing as well, yes, Southern Miss ended up having just over 5 yards a carry and nearly 200 yards. But yes, Robert Briggs, a lot of this was later in the game, 7 carries, 55 yards. You had their starter, Matt Jones. Pittman was actually out, so Matt Jones ended up being the starter, 12 carries, 42 yards. That's along the lines of how he was for the rest of the season. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, but he wasn't able to get more than 4 yards a carry. They had Jalen Carter, who carved out a 27-yard touchdown run late in the game. He got a bit more of a gashes that made the rushing attempts seem a little bit more palatable for Southern Miss. But overall, the rushing defense was not the issue. It also wasn't the issue for Southern Miss with their own penalties. But Monroe did constantly shoot themselves in the foot. 11 penalties, 78 yards. Sometimes it ended up ruining their drives. Sometimes it just backed them up even further on drives. What just took them out of this game was those 3 straight possessions of turnovers, which was that culmination of a run. That was 3 straight touchdowns for the Golden Eagles. And at that point, it gets out of hand. Hopefully they can build on this and not make this more of a 2-game trend. Because if not, they might just lose the rest of their games despite the fact of their opponents left over. They couldn't overcome a strong 2024 Marshall squad. Yes, I do mean Marshall. But yeah, look at the rest of their schedule. Last 4 weeks of the season, all conference games, all very winnable games. The middle to bottom feeders in the conference. If they can win 3 of those 4 games, they're going bowling. If not, then we're back to where we were last year. So we'll see what happens. More videos on Monroe going to come soon, especially if I end up being there for one of those next couple games, but see what happens. Thank y'all for watching. Please comment, like down below. Subscribe if you enjoyed this. If you want to see more Louisiana college content that's not just LSU, I'll try to be covering as much of it as I can, especially if I go to those games. Thank y'all for watching. I'll see you on the next one.